Hi everyone, welcome to this video that we have put together for Autism Awareness Week. I am a mum of two and my eldest Harry was diagnosed with autism last year. It was something that nursery had been aware of for a little while, but actually our GP said that she didn't think it was a year previously, and I think it took till he was 3 for them to start thinking they recognised the attributes as being autistic. And it was really bad timing because it was literally like a month before lockdown, so any support or guidance that we might have got disappeared, and all the appointments that we should have had didn't happen. So we're only really catching up now, but thankfully his school have been amazing. But I'm really keen to share my story because I know how hard it's been for me trying to find out more, trying to work out what I should be doing as a mum of an autistic child. And often you can feel like you're getting everything wrong, and really you're not, because everyone else is going through similar as well. So I'm joined by 4 lovely mums. I'm so grateful to you guys for responding to my request for people to share their story. We've all just been saying how important that is so that people don't feel like they're on their own. So that's why we've got together today. And I'm just going to go through you as you are on my screen, because that's probably the easiest way to do it. So Zoe, you and I know each other through work. Do you want to tell everybody about your story with your little one?
Yeah, well, I'm a mum of 4, but when my first child, and my oldest 2 are autistic, but when my first child was diagnosed, I didn't know anything about autism. I knew from a young child there was something different, and I knew when we went out to play groups it was very challenging, but she didn't actually get diagnosed until she was at 8 or 9, but I didn't know anything about autism back then, so I didn't know that she was. I didn't know what to expect. It was school that had an EP who came in and said, "Oh, we think she's actually Asperger's." That's what they called it back then. And then we had to go through I think it was called the MAP team, and they all had a meeting, then decided that she actually was autistic, but that was kind of all we was given, that she's autistic. Here's the label, but actually not given any support.
Yeah.
I also had another son by the time she was 4. He was very different in his childhood. She was very, very, very quick and everything, clever. He was very behind, but because she was so fast, I didn't flash that as being unnormal, because maybe he was doing it at the correct speed.
Yeah.
Again, there wasn't any support there, and he was later diagnosed with ADHD, but again, there was no support or diagnosis early on at all for us. So it's been quite a difficult journey for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's quite a common experience, actually, that it can be quite a lot of twists and turns, and you often quite have to push for the support.
Yeah.
Kelly, you run a wonderful group on Facebook for to support autism parents. Would you say, does that sound like a similar experience to what people share with you?
Generally, I mean, I know obviously a lot of people do fight for a diagnosis, fight to actually be heard and actually be taken seriously, because sometimes, as obviously you're probably all well aware, how a child presents at school isn't always necessarily how they present at home. And the minute as a parent you bring up something that actually school aren't seeing, it's like, oh, well, it's obviously you that's the problem because we don't see a problem. And you end up just kind of going round and round in circles, and just feeling very isolated and not really knowing who to turn to. And I think that was one of the reasons that kind of the group came about. But it is very much a common, and unfortunately to say, a common theme. I think there's more people who struggle to get the support and diagnosis than there are people who actually just kind of go, well, actually, as was fine.
Yeah, I think that's from what I've seen in my short time of being involved with it. I think, yeah, that's absolutely. How about yourself? What was your journey with it?
For my first child, it was very different to the others, because I've got 4 children. My eldest now is actually 19. I think obviously, I mean, when you first become a mum anyway, you've never got anything to compare it to, so it is constantly a learning curve from day one. So initially, I didn't think there was anything different. I did have a few problems within my pregnancy. I had high blood pressure, which I eventually got admitted to hospital with, and I had extra monitoring and extra fluid, but then around obviously the baby. But then once Callum was arrived, everything seemed to be fine, until we started noticing, well, actually, he's not doing what that child's doing. and he's not doing what that child's doing. And obviously at the time, as a new parent, I've only got obviously the books, whatever everybody else is saying, and seeing what other people's children at kind of the play groups and places that you go to compare to. And at the time, I constantly remember saying to like the health visitor, well, he's not doing this and he's not doing this. And all you kind of got back is, well, everybody will do it in their own time.
Yeah.
And as he's approaching 2, obviously he's still not reaching these milestones that he's supposed to. And I know we were told, and I know it's different now, but obviously back when he was 2, they said, well, no professionals are going to get involved until he turns 2.
Yeah.
So for us, all the professionals got involved literally as he turned 2. We first had the diagnosis of severe global development delay because as well as being on the autistic spectrum, my son has lots of different other conditions as well. But the first thing that he was diagnosed with was global development delay. He was obviously had lots of support from nursery. He got his diagnosis of autism round about when he was 7. Because he has such a severe learning difficulty, a lot of his behaviours were kind of overshadowed a little bit like by obviously his general delay. And then from that point where the professionals did get involved, we have had an awful lot of support, thankfully. So we've never been without anybody to turn to. We've never been without a social worker. So we've literally, on that respect, been kind of supported every step of the way. In terms of knowing what was going on, I didn't have a clue, because it was almost like, this is what's happening, this is the diagnosis your child's been given, but then that was it. It was never an actual explanation of what that involved, what that would look like on a day-to-day basis for him and for us as a family. Obviously at the time it was just me, my husband and Callum. And I remember when we started to think about having more children, we actually went to Callum's paediatrician at the time and kind of said, right, obviously, this is how Callum is. If we go ahead and decide to expand our family and have any more children, what is the likelihood of those children having the same condition as Callum? And it makes me laugh even now, because the response we had from the paediatrician was, it's not genetic. You've got just as much chance as anybody else having a child with similar conditions. So fast forward many years later, I've now got obviously 4 children. My daughter, who is 15, she presented absolutely, I'm going to say, like neurotypical all the way through. As she's got older, it's become more and more and more apparent that actually all she's been doing is masking. And she is now herself at 15 on the autism assessment waiting list. And I feel quite sad, really, because I feel I should have perhaps picked up a little bit earlier. But because Callum was so very different, I was like, well, obviously she can't be, because they're so very, very different. I've got a 12-year-old. He is actually diagnosed with ADHD. And it has also been obviously said that he's most possibly on the autistic spectrum as well. The way we are with that was the support there is a little bit iffy. He does have support in school from terms of a medical point of view. We've kind of been told that although he might be, and it's more likely that he is on the autistic spectrum, there's no point in going for a diagnosis because it's just another label, and he's managing okay with his ADHD medication, which I completely disagree with. And obviously that's one of my little fights that's going on at the moment. But in terms of getting him diagnosed, that was complete and utter self-referral every single step of the way. I asked school to get involved. They didn't see a problem. I asked them to do observations. The Senko at the time actually came back to me, and her words at the time was, I know ADHD, and in my professional opinion, your son does not have ADHD. And I said, right, that's fine, thank you, I'll take your report. And then I felt like going in and waving the diagnosis letter right in her face at the end of it all, but I didn't. And then my youngest son, who is now 9, he has learning difficulties. He's on the special educational need register. We don't have an official diagnosis, but being completely honest, I don't think that we will not end up having one. But like everything, I think depending on where you are, who you speak to, really does depend on the level of support and input you get across the board, in my experience, really.
Absolutely. I think it's becoming clear that if you have previous experience, that will make such a difference, even just in confidence in yourself for pushing for the diagnosis, if you know. So Rachel, you were just saying that you had experience of autism before your own child was diagnosed with it, which helped.
Yes. Yeah, so I worked in schools as a teacher's assistant, so looking after children specifically with ADHD, learning difficulties and autism. So knew the signs, but when you see it in your own child, you don't necessarily want to believe it, I suppose. So for me, it was, so my son was diagnosed with Asperger's in 2018, and they did call it that. It was written as Asperger's, and I know that people say all the time now, we don't use that, but they diagnosed him with Asperger's, and then they said high functioning autism. So the thing for me was, at the age of 2, he was speaking in full sentences. You know, I'll ask him what he's doing, he says, "Mummy, I'm wearing your shoes," or "Mummy, can you open the door?" So he's got all the joining thing. I mean, it was just like, my child is so clever. I didn't want to be like, I didn't want to be that mum that was just like, I've got such a clever child, but he was very clever. And the first signs were at nursery, they were saying to me that he's really naughty. He may have ADHD. And I was like, no, he doesn't. I was absolutely in denial. He's just really clever. And I said to them, move him. The reason why he's frustrated is because those children aren't at the same level as him. He can't talk to them. He can't interact with them because they don't talk back. So he loved talking to older children and being with adults. And so they moved him into the older class, and he settled down again because he could interact with his peers in that way. Yeah. It got to, he was, just before he moved to reception, he couldn't go any further up. So all of his friends left and went to school, and he was kind of kept back another year, and big issues started to arise at nursery. But I was still very much like, no, it's not ADHD. I'll have a think about other things. Then he went to school, and at school he was an angel. He did everything right. He masked completely, and it got to, so he was in reception, and then it was year 1 where I just went into school one day. I'd had the most horrendous morning. It had been going on for months and months and months. I couldn't figure out like why he did this to me, because I was a single mum. I am a single mum. Looked after him on my own since he was 18 months old. And it was very much like, I can't cope. And I burst into tears. And they were going, really? We don't see that. So I was like, great. Because I thought this is going to be difficult. But actually the school were amazing. And when I actually said to them, this is what he does at home, it's really, really difficult. The meltdowns, he headbutts things, he's rocking backwards and forwards. It's like he holds it all in. And then the second he leaves the school gate, just fell to pieces, absolutely just collapsed. And I couldn't get anything out of him. I couldn't talk to him. Little things like he has to have his dinner at 5 o'clock. If it's not on the table at 5 o'clock, he will absolutely like explode. And I think people are smiling because you know what I mean. And really I was very lucky because, as I said, my diagnosis was quite smooth. It did take a while to actually get the initial appointment. So from the time that I fell to pieces and when I can't do this, I don't know what to do, it took about 18 months just to get that first appointment. But once I had it, and I knew what to say to them, because obviously I'd experienced it before, and I'd done a lot of reading about it. Within the year, I had the diagnosis, and the school had sent back, once they'd actually started to observe him, they could see the masking. Yeah. So like shaking and getting really tense, and maybe it was like those, I need to answer every single question and I won't put my hand up, it's that kind of, so they started to notice. And from there, it was fairly easy. But having said that, I got the diagnosis, and because he's high functioning and he's kind of coasting along at the top of the class, I get nothing. There is no help, there's no support. He doesn't have any HCP because they don't think he needs one. The one thing they have done is they've given him a sensory drawer, so that if he gets stressed out, he can go to the drawer, kind of feel things and fiddle with things for 5 minutes, and they don't question it, and then he'll go and sit back down. Because he's let that out, he doesn't have the stress when he gets home, because he's already released himself at school. He can, so they have done that, but I get nothing now. So all the support and everything has come from me searching for Facebook groups, for, you know, doing my own research, because they literally give you the diagnosis and then go, there you go. Yeah, he's got Asperger's, off you go, you deal with it now. And they just tick you off the list and off you go. And I've had nothing since. And that was 2018, and he's now 9, but acts like he's got a reading age of 13, acts like a teenager at 9 years old. So yeah.
Sounds like a lot of fun. How about yourself, Elaine? I know you said that yours are a little bit older than mine. So were they diagnosed at a young age, or how did your journey go?
I've got a son at 18 with no diagnosis, and I've got a daughter at 12. She's coming up for 13 at the end of the year. Both mine are adopted, so we expected not so much autism, but we were expected to have issues as they grew up, and yeah, we got them. But with my daughter, she came to us when she was 1. And she used to commando crawl, and she had eating problems, and just, again, we were sort of like expecting global development delay and things like that. So we were fine. It wasn't, we never really thought that there was any issues or anything. When she started to come to school, we just, we weren't looking for any signs or anything, but she's so flipping clumsy, bless her, and she just falls constantly, and she bumps into things, and she's got like hypermobility. So I remember just an off the cuff comment to one of the to the head teacher after receiving like the 5th bump note of 2 days, saying, do you think she's got dyslexia? I've had a read, and do you think she's got dyslexia? And the head teacher went, oh my goodness, why have we not thought of that before? Yes. And she was brilliant, the head. She said, I says, what's the next step? She went, go to your GP, because it will take an age if you go through school. So we went to the GP, had a meeting with the GP, as daughters was there. And I will never forget, we were sat in the GP room, and there was a student there as well. And as my daughter just went straight into the corner where the toys are kept and just lined them all up. And she had never done that before. She only ever lines up when she's in a medical environment. It's really weird. Oh. And she just lined all these toys up, and me and my husband were like going, what? She's like really pulling her finger here, she's doing so well. So yeah, we were referred, went for referral. They diagnosed DCD, dyspraxia, straight away, because that was just like obvious. And then they said, yeah, we think possibly autism as well. What do you think? And we went, well, we don't know, we just whatever, because the behaviours were there. Definitely, when we spoke to teachers, they were like, oh yeah, she has this behaviour, she has that behaviour, she's got learning difficulties as well. So it's just like lots of different layers of her particular onion, if you like. And it took, we were a couple of years getting the diagnosis, but that was just waiting lists and going through. We went in for the assessment, and they went, yeah, well, yeah, it's obvious she does have autism. So we got the assessment, and then support wise, we've been on courses. We've never had any sort of issues with being on parental courses and things like that, and had adaptions made at school. Got in touch with the autism team for school to make adaptions, and then everything was hunky-dory until, because she got a diagnosis when she was 7, when she then went into Y4, we started having problems at school. She then got a really good teacher who understood her, and then she got a teacher who didn't, shall we say, and we had an awful 2 years because she had the same teacher for the 2 years. Nothing detrimental about the teacher, they just it just wasn't the vibe that was right for her at all. So we ended up taking her out of school after a lot of a lot of stress and a lot of heartache, because his daughter, it's like Fight Club school. What goes on in school she does not discuss. You find absolutely nothing out. She's very good at compartmentalizing, so we don't know anything about what is happening. So yeah, she don't want to tell you, she will not tell you. And we just didn't know, and we lost our little girl. We just had no clue that she was so traumatized and so unhappy, and until she became school refusal. But I mean, I can tell you about that bit later. But so yeah, our diagnosis was pretty smooth really, and support wise okay. Having said that, I have never really searched for support as such. If I felt the need, I needed a course, I've gone on the course. I've never sort of like looked for behaviours that I can then compensate, because I think that we've all got to get on in the world, and we accommodate for us kids and everything, but they've also got to get on in the world as well, and learn how to be rejected, which is tragic and awful, and as a parent you don't want that, but it's going to happen. So we have to sort of like build their resilience, and my main aim as an autism mom is building resilience in my daughter, helping her to build a resilience, to be more of who she is and not hide behind who she is.
It's also not using it as an excuse, I suppose.
Yeah.
You can't just say, well, they have autism, so that's why they do what they do. I still explain to my son quite constantly, you can't do that. You know, it's not okay, because he lashes out and he gets very angry. And I have to tell him, you need to learn to control these emotions, but I don't know how. So it's like, right, okay, well, let's. And I think that's one of the things, is I'm worried that he's only 9 and he hits me and lashes out. Yeah. What's going to happen as he starts to get older? As we were talking about that transition, I suppose, because at the moment he controls it at school, but he could get a bully or someone do something to him that he does not like. Because I believe my son's got oppositional defiance disorder as well, but I haven't really bothered to go through the diagnosis for that, because I already know I don't really need it, and so that's my worry. As time goes on, he'll just start to get angrier and angrier, and it's dealing with that side of things as he grows up, I think, and he needs to know that it's not okay. So I can't let him get away with it because he has autism. It's a difficult one. You kind of fight your battles, so you pick your battles. Like, which one am I going to deal with now?
And I think it's very much a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because obviously we're trying to get the world to accommodate our children, but at the same time the world is as it is, and while we need to educate and shape it as best we can, we also need to build our children to realise that actually you do have to, if you want to be independent, you are going to have to, I don't want to use the word, but I can't think of anything else right now, but conform, and that is the wrong word, but you know what I mean, you have somehow got to figure out the best way for you to kind of to live in the world that we life.
Definitely, it's getting that balance right, isn't it? Because that's I always say that Harry is Harry. To me, he is normal. This is the son that I have been given, and this is just the way we're going to have to find our way through life. But also, actually, I can't just treat him as normal, because there are certain provisions that we have to make for him. Even simply dropping him off at school, I have to do certain things. I have to allow for him to stop. Every day stops at the bus stop, and I'm like looking, hoping the bus isn't coming along, but he has to sit down on the bus stop every day when we walk past. We didn't this morning, and he got really upset about it. So it's making those provisions, but sort of getting your head around it. And I think for me, that's been the hardest thing, without wanting to sound selfish. It's he just gets on with it. He just sort of gets on with life in general. But for me, it's been it not being what I expect it to be. as a parent. And I struggled with I had postnatal depression after Harry. It was before he was diagnosed, but after having him. And so I've constantly always had this doubt about being a mum and not being very good at it. And autism just seems to add this whole other level of self-criticism, I think, doesn't it? I can see all of you nodding. Zoe, how has that been for you?
Yeah, it was like I say, she was diagnosed autistic, but as a young parent and a first-time parent, we used to go to play groups, and she used to be horrendous with her behaviour, and everyone used to look at me, and I used to think, what am I doing wrong? So I used to just avoid them because there's so much criticism. And she, because I didn't know then, because of being autistic, she couldn't cope in these play groups. So being at home, she was happy and okay, but it was so difficult, all the judging and seeing other children, and well, she didn't do that. What am I doing wrong? She didn't behave like that.
Definitely, absolutely, exactly. I remember Harry had a birthday party that we went to, and it was a really popular place near where we live. And what they do is they do different activities. So in the party will go round to about 5 different activities. But it would take him ages to want to do the activity, and then by the time he'd sat down, they were moving on to the next one. And I couldn't explain to him that even though the train he was enjoying is still there, he's got to go on to the next one. And in the end, I just gave up and let him play with whatever he wanted. But like you say, you then worry about the judging of other people. So I suppose that's why it's so important to do have videos like this and have communities where we can come to and know that we're not going to get judged, because actually there's an awful lot of us out there, I think, isn't there, Kelly?
Yeah.
It's like when we were homeschooling and I had to take my son to the supermarket. The meltdowns were insane. And I remember, and it really made me laugh, we were walking around the supermarket and he was holding himself together and he just looks at me and he says, "But mummy, I hate people."
Oh, bless.
And I just went, I get it. I understand. But I have no choice right now, because he loves having conversations, and he does love people in his own way. He can't cope with overwhelming crowds of people, and he likes to play with, he does have friends and he has great time with them, but he wants it his way, and arguments start because they're not doing it the way he wants them to do it. And he'll go over to them and say this, that, the other, and he doesn't get on at after school club because he always gets in trouble. Because they don't understand him. They don't understand why he's just gone up and interrupted this game. They were playing fine. Why did he go and tell them what they're supposed to do? I'm like, it's just what he does. And he answers them back all the time. He's really naughty. He answers back all the time. I'm like, he answers me back all the time. He likes to be right about everything. I don't know what you want me to say, because he does the same to me, and they just automatically assume that it's because he's a naughty child and he's defiant and he's being rude. And it's like, that's not what he's doing. He just thinks he's right, and he wants to tell you that he's right. So he needs to get the last word in. He has to say the last thing. And it's that judgment that I'm doing something wrong because he does that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know what you want me to say. He does that to me too, but that makes me a bad parent because he shouldn't do that. Do you know, it's that kind of, and I know that there's nothing more I can do, but that is.
Whereas actually the onus is on those people. It's on school, it's on mum groups, the women at the mums groups, to not be quite so quick to criticize, and to be a bit more understanding and of everything, not just autism but just in general, I think. And that's most people are, but actually, I mean, you catch yourself doing it, where you see a child running off and you think, I stopped the other day because there was a kid running for a road, and then I thought, I hope that they didn't think I was judging them. I just wanted to make sure she was safe. But so I think it's stopping ourselves reacting. So there's that as well. There's, you worry whether you're doing the right thing. You've got the mum guilt of whether you're being judged. And one of the things that I'm feeling a lot at the moment is worrying for his future. So that's why it's nice to speak to you guys with having older kids, is worrying about, I mean, there's this, simple things like
secondary school.
That's
what's scary. How they're going to cope with that.
That's it. He's Harry's in reception at the moment, and he loves his teacher, is wonderful. I adore him. but I'm really scared about him moving away from him, like you say, if he gets a teacher that he doesn't get on with as well. And then there's big school, and then there's, will he ever have the opportunity to go to uni if he wants to, or, you know, and just in general, I often think about relationships and whether he'll have a girlfriend or not, and, you know, whether it's whether that's going to be something, how on earth I tackle all of that. I think there's a lot of overthinking when you're an autism mum.
I think you get that when you've got neurotypical kids as well, though. You certainly do. You have exactly the same concerns and worries, however they may well be just magnified, or are we using that as an excuse that we want to protect our kids? And I think it's sometimes we need to, they are in this world for their own reasons, and we sometimes, I think, have to take ourselves out of that and let our ego just disappear and let them. My daughter's got so many ambitions. She wants to travel the world. She wants to be a famous YouTuber. She wants to be a famous makeup artist. She wants to do anything and everything. And I'm like, yeah, go do it. But she's going to, when she's traveling the world, she's going on a bike because she's scared of going on an aeroplane, and she's scared of going on a train, and she's scared of going on whatever. And I think it's up to us to say, yeah, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Enjoy your moments now rather than like worrying about what's going to happen in the future, because none of us know what's going to happen.
I think because as mums of autistic children, I do feel that we put a lot of it on ourselves, because we overthink things. What if, rather than concentrating on the here and now. Obviously, the future is important, of course it is, and you want to make sure that those plans are in place to ensure that your children's needs are met in whatever form that needs to be throughout the rest of their lives. But I think sometimes a lot of the stuff that we worry about, it's our own insecurities, not, like you were saying, not the children's.
Yes.
So we actually, I think, sometimes put on far too much on ourselves than we actually need to.
Certain cushions we've got, we have to have them out of her way, and we if you've got jeans on, she cannot stand it, you know, like if you just fidget a little bit, the noise just,
the noise, that's really interesting.
Bless her, when she starts dating, he's going to have to wear flipping tracksuit bottoms or farers.
I remember you said about being in their head. I remember going to and I can't remember the name of it, but it was like an inclusive event where there was lots of different, you know, support stalls and bits and pieces. And while we were there was a big van, and it was an autism experience, and it was a simulation of actually, and if you
I remember how it felt to kind of,
yes,
Wow.
anybody who was at the event who was autistic or who had any neurodiversity at all were not allowed in, because they said obviously it would just completely
overload them completely. Yeah.
And there was only a few people, you had to go in a few times, and you had to put stuff on, and it was really, really eye-opening. They had stuff where you had to sit down, and actually made it painful when you sat down, and there was all sorts of noises, and they got you to do tasks with all the, and I came out really thinking, wow, I was in there. I think the kind of whole simulation, and they got you to do bits and pieces while you were in there. I think the whole thing lasted about 15 minutes, and I came out and I was really overwhelmed coming out. I thought, almost like a release from coming out of it, and I'm then thinking,
and you think they've got to deal with that.
That's what our children is like all the time.
Every day, yeah. Because I had he tells my mum quite a bit more than he tells me sometimes, because she has him a couple of times after school. And one time she said he told me that all his friends are sitting on him at school, like literally 5 or 6 people sitting on him. And I'm like, that doesn't sound very safe. So I had to tell the school that he likes it. He's not like he's being bullied or anything. That's what he's asked them to do, and they're all like, "Woo! Let's sit on here. It's fun." And they've had to actually say, even if he asks you to, don't sit on him, because it could be quite dangerous, you know, because he just doesn't fit. It's that personal space thing. He wants to be really close, and sometimes he'll be here, and I'll be like feeling claustrophobic myself because I can't get air, you know. I just feel, because he wants to be so close to me, everything has to be touching.
Yeah.
So I'm like, he will sit as close to me as possible. He's almost like behind my shoulder, you know. He'll be there, because he wants that intensity. He has to have that real kind of crazy closeness, and no personal space, no stranger danger, you know. He'll just literally go, what are you doing? And he'll like practically sit on the electrician's lap or something, you know. He'll want to know what everything, and he'll just be like right in their face, you know. Crazy.
Yeah, Harry's like that a lot actually. If he's just in that kind of mood, he has to be next to me, he has to be on top of me, he has to be touching me in some way. And after you've had a full day of dealing with their meltdowns and trying to second guess what they're going to do next and everything like that, I get very touched out, and I reach a point where I'm just like, please will you just leave me alone? And then I feel so sad because
I've had to say that, and I feel really guilty. I'm just like, oh, I don't mean it like that, it's just, it's too intense, you know. It's just like too much, and he does that. They don't understand that, because it's that, you know. But I just want to be close to you, you know. They don't really get it. It's claustrophobic for some people as well.
Definitely. I'm conscious that we've spoken a lot about sort of primary school age and below as well, the journey getting to there, but we said that we would like to cover sort of children as they get older. So I suppose really particularly Elaine and Kelly, what would you say, what would you share with me for what I've got to expect, you know, what's it like transitioning from childhood to teenage years, which is bad enough anyway.
Do you know, actually, I'm loving this journey at the moment. I'm really am. We've got over a horrendous time of being in Y 4, 5, and some of 6. We pulled her out and homeschooled her for a while.
Did you find secondary school, that was it? Like, did they help you more at secondary school, or did they understand it more? That was
we actually took her out of mainstream school. We stopped her in mainstream school when she was 11. She could not cope with mostly the friendship issues, friendships being horrendous the whole way through. I think all parents should be educated on dealing with making the kids more accepting, because it's not even making the kids more accepting, it's the parents being more accepting, because
so
kids
girls
naturally
are me, aren't they? Sorry, my light really bad.
Most of her friends in mainstream school were all boys, because they could do the rough and tumble. As soon as the girls got that little bit older and it was discussing the more grown-up things and didn't want to play with dolls, it was just, it was horrendous, bless her. So we took her out, and then she'd got an EHCP, and we put her in. We wanted her to go to we've got a high school near us that has got a unit they call the Hub, which has got a specialist section in for kids with autism, and we wanted her to go there. Went and looked round, but she would have had to do 50% of her time in the mainstream school, which she wanted to do. She was like adamant she was going there with her friends who were so nice to her, and anyway, she didn't get in. There was only 70, I think they'd had 23 applications. They were losing 4 students leaving, so there was only, I think, 5 or 6 spaces, and she didn't get in, even though literally we lived around the corner. She could have walked there. So now she goes to a specialist school for autism. It's amazing. She's like a different child. She absolutely loves it. We still don't know what her version of school is, because she doesn't, like I said, she doesn't speak to us about it. I'm going to tell you a funny story actually about it, but we get a letter every day, so we've got a book, we've got communication,
you know what's going on.
And she's coming on, she's learning how to make cups of tea and do things that will help her she's absolutely loving it. She doesn't like a lot of the stuff where they have to play football, because that's pointless, but it's
why do I need to do that?
But she does love, she's got a friend, and praise the Lord for WhatsApp groups and things, because they have video chats and everything. And even though they're across the city, it's just so lovely that she's got that friendship circle now. It's amazing. But I'm going to tell you this because it just so made me laugh, and it's very inappropriate as well. But she came home the other day and she went, Mummy, I got a tick on the board at school today. I went, oh, brilliant. Pleased that she'd actually shared something from school. She went, yes, I got a tick on the board. I went, what was it for? She went, I said vagina, breast and penis because we're doing puberty. I went, well done, you got a tick for that. She went, yes, I did. She went, I didn't say the n-ob word because I thought I might have got into trouble. Just so made me laugh. And believe me, she knows everything. She knows everything there is to know.
It's the fact that they're so literal about everything as well, isn't it? So whatever you say, they're just like, yeah. Or if you say something a little bit obscure, like my son always likes to say, well, actually, if we're being literal and correct here, well, actually.
When they correct you and you're like, yeah, I didn't really mean it like that, but yes, you're right, I shouldn't have said that, or I shouldn't have done that.
It's learning how to say things differently as well, so that they don't react to what you say, because you have to actually think, right, how do I have to explain this to him so he's not going to have that reaction, and I can't just say it because this will happen. And so it's just like, how can I reword this so he doesn't go no.
And I think that's a really important skill to actually hope for. I'd like to think, but for teachers to have, because I know my son has got in a lot of trouble previously because he's been deemed to be answering back.
That's what my son gets. Yeah, he gets.
When actually he's just answering the question, but it's from the intention of the teacher coming out as sarcastic or rhetorical. Yeah, they don't understand that. They're just answering the question. I remember my son got in an awful lot of trouble once. He was out of his seat and he was walking around because he'd got distracted. And the teacher had said, "What do you think you're doing out of your seat?" And he went, "Well, I'm just having a walk around." Now he
literally, that's what I'm doing.
He wasn't being rude, but because she didn't mean it like that, what she actually meant to say was, "Please, can you go and sit down? You shouldn't be out of your seat." Had she said that, he would have been completely clear on what the expectation was. But as it transpired, she wasn't expecting an answer from him. He answered the question that she asked, and he got in trouble.
That's what matter like.
Trouble a lot. Yeah, my son gets into quite a lot of trouble because he answers back all the time. What they assume is answering back, or he just wants to answer the question and he calls out constantly because he knows it. I know, and he wants everyone else to know that he knows. And he is constantly getting into trouble. He missed playtime 3 times last week, and I'm like, this isn't very fair. I'm not liking this very much. I need to have a conversation about the teacher, because I think there's discipline and there is keeping control of the class, and then there's just not understanding why he's done what you think he's done. There's a big difference there, because he will just take anything you say as given, basically.
Absolutely. I think an open line with school is so important, so vital, or nursery, obviously depending on their age, but being able to, and knowing that they, like nursery were always really good at not pushing anything, so when it came to toilet training, he still isn't fully toilet trained yet. So school have been really patient, but nursery were really good at understanding, okay, he should be ready, but he isn't, so we'll
hear awful stories, don't you, where they're forcing them to do something, and then it delays them because they're scared, and it kind of doesn't make sense to do that because you've just actually set them back 6 months because they're scared of doing it, because you've just told them that they have to and that's it, kind of thing, and they're not ready. They need the time to do it. Sometimes they need longer, and sometimes they do it way before everybody else, but it's that I think sometimes some schools are amazing, but not every teacher is amazing. So as they move through each class, the struggles become more apparent, and especially since my son's been back at school, he's got into a lot of trouble. And I just wonder, why is she being quite so aggressive? Considering they've had so long off school as well, you've got to remember that their routine was completely destroyed. Homeschooling was horrendous for me. Horrendous. He wouldn't do things. Home is home, school is school. I'm not doing it. You know, it was absolutely refusal. But now that they're back, I think the lack of understanding there and knowing his quirks, because they haven't got to know them properly, have they? They've not had that intense time with them to understand that, well, that is just what he does, and you need to kind of be a little bit lenient. I'm not saying don't tell him off, you know, if he needs to be, then obviously do it, but I think a lot of teachers don't have a full awareness of it, and I don't think it's it taught, and it should be part of their training to deal with that kind of. His previous teacher was amazing. She's the one who put the sensory box in place, sent home stuff from school, like you know, those what they're called, picture stories. I can't think what they're called.
Social stories.
Social stories, yes. Because my son is very intelligent, but he's not emotionally intelligent at all. So emotionally, it's just not. It's something that he needs to learn. So he may be 13 in academically, but he's only about 5 or 6 emotionally, you know, so it's a big gap there. And how you learn to build that side of it up, I think. And the teachers see them so much more than we do. I suppose they need to learn to help them in that way as well, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
My daughter's emotionally intelligent when she's detached from the situation. If it involves her or any of us, if like I was upset about something, she would be really concerned unless she was the trigger, so to speak, and then that wouldn't apply. But like yesterday, for example, she was on the phone to one of her friends and his stepdad shouted at him, and she spent a long time stressing about her friend's emotional needs and welfare and being really upset about it. And do you think we should call the police? And really like looking into that, because I think our kids now are a lot more socially aware with things that are going around, and I think my daughter's definitely more socially aware of things, much more than I was, and sometimes I am. She's my educator, she totally is. She's taught me so many life skills and so much of how to behave and things.
I think that's the same, the empathy thing. People say that autistic children don't have empathy, but they do.
Oh, Harry does, yeah.
It's just well placed.
They have emotions and they understand, like, but it's just not the same. They might not see it the same way as you do.
Yeah,
you watch them
in their presentation of it, isn't it, and their behaviour.
Yeah, he watched Marley and Me, and I was bawling my eyes out, and he just looks at me going, "Why are you crying?" I'm like, "Because it's really sad." And he goes, "No, it's not. It's like, but it happens, doesn't it?" You know, he was literally just like, "That's life," you know, and he wasn't emotional about that. But when Dobby died in Harry Potter, he cried his eyes out, and I was like, "Hang on a minute." The dog was real. Dobby. That's the only thing he's ever cried at.
Oh, bless
when Dobby dies in Harry Potter. Everything else he's just like, oh, it's just life and death. It's just what happens, you know. But he does know. He does understand. So I'm just thinking of something. My mum was saying, "Oh, I'm looking so like my mum," and my nanny has passed away a few years ago. And my son just looked at her. He's 9, and he just looked at her and went, "But she's dead." And he literally was like, and we all just cracked up laughing, because we were like, she doesn't mean that she looks like her now, because that would be weird. But that's just how he took it, and he just said it. But she's dead. Yes, but you have to laugh, because otherwise you could get a bit like, you know, I think that people can be a bit too precious about things as well, and they're just so literal that they just say it as it is.
Definitely need a sense of humour.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
I think that leads us nicely actually into the final thing that I just wanted to make sure we cover, because I think it is really important for anybody that's watching this and thinking, actually, yeah, mine does that, or I feel really alone on my journey, places to go. So what's been the biggest sort of support for you guys? What's been the biggest help? Callie, I'm going to come to you, because I think the obvious answer is with you.
I mean, for me, on a personal level, Like I said, I know because we've had a lot of support from Callum being little, I've always had somebody to turn to ask. So like usually we've always had a social worker. So for me, that's always been my first point of call. We've had a lot of professionals working with us. So I know I'm very fortunate in the fact that I know I've always had somebody to turn to. Now, they've not always, we've obviously gone through different social workers. Some have been much more helpful than others. But for me, it's just knowing that there are other people out there going through the same things as you have gone through. And then obviously for me, my personal journey was I actually have almost come full circle, because I started teaching in the learning support unit. And I actually supported one particular lad. My first kind of pupil, if you like, who was designated to me, did have ADHD. So I've kind of gone through supporting obviously the children on the special educational needs register, gone into teaching myself, and then actually had to take voluntary redundancy to come back because of my caring role at home came too much. So I've literally now, I feel like I've gone almost full circle. And for me, that was one of the reasons that I set up the parent support group that obviously I know that you're in. Because it was about that not feeling alone, knowing that actually there are lots of other parents that are going through exactly the same thing, or actually other parents that are going through different things, so that you can actually say to somebody, I'm doing this, do you have any advice? And not actually being able to have to wait to get an answer from a professional. Or sometimes you just get sent round in circles with professionals, go here, go here, go here, go here, and you've actually perhaps spent 6-12 months going to different people and achieving absolutely nothing. But actually being able to speak to people and saying, well, have you tried this? Have you been here? Or have you heard about this people? I'll give you a number, I'll give you an email. Yeah. So it's all that kind of support from personal experiences of, we also, obviously, all our children, it is a spectrum. Our children are all very, very different. And our parenting experiences are going to be very, very different. Yeah. So when we can kind of come together, we've just got a great big ball of knowledge.
Is yours the UK Autism Spectrum Parent Support Group, or is yours a different one?
No, mine's a different one. Mine's Autism Parent Support. It's self-care for a sensational life. Sensational warriors.
So that was my one that I'm on, is the UK Autism Spectrum Parent Support Group, because it's been amazing. Just to say, my child has just done this, do you understand? You know, and they totally do, and they get you, they know what you're going through, they give you advice, and it's been absolutely amazing. But I will look for yours now.
One thing, as what I'm really proud of, is the way it's developed, is we've also got quite a few autistic members in there as well.
Yeah.
So we can kind of say, right, okay, well, as parents, we're not quite sure why my child is doing this. Can you shed some light on this from an autistic person's perspective? So it's a real nice kind of lovely, friendly group of people, but that in itself covers the diversity.
It's interesting though that most of us, I assume, I don't know, most of the help has come from other parents in a Facebook group. Yes. I mean, that's what I find quite disappointing, to be honest. It's brilliant and it's absolutely amazing, but it shouldn't be like that. No. Because I have had no support since his diagnosis whatsoever. He was 7 years old and they just gave me a piece of paper to say he has Asperger's, off you go. And I got nothing. And the school don't help because he's clever. He's clever at school, so he doesn't need help. But actually, it just means he's coasting at the top and being ignored, where it's actually he needs to be pushed. But they won't do that because we need to deal with the other ones that are struggling. And so from both the school and the doctors, I feel like very let down in that in those terms, because the only place that I get my advice is from Facebook. I mean, how nuts is that?
Yeah, I think what I find hard is all the anagram acronyms.
Oh yeah.
I completely lost track, and people say to me, have you done this, have you done that? I'm like, I don't know.
I don't know
I
what that
honestly,
means.
I don't know. Nobody's really sat down and talked me through what the process is, made 10 times more complicated by the fact that everything's taking so long because of COVID at the moment. And I've not met anybody, I've not even seen anybody by a video call. It's been a phone call with a couple of really nice, helpful ladies, but I've forgotten their names already. I can't remember who it was or where they were from, and you just sort of lose track. There's no description of what's going to happen next, possibly because it's different with everyone, and that's the hardest thing I think to keep on top of, is which forms should I have sent where, and am I supposed to, when was I meant to chase up with the doctor, and because he's still not been diagnosed by a paediatrician, because it's just jumping through hoops everywhere and following red I know what I mean, but yeah, so that is a bit of a
paper trails.
Yeah, exactly that. So absolutely, I think although it is a shame that actually the NHS are so struggling at the moment, they probably don't give as much support as they would like to. The groups like the two that you guys have mentioned are absolutely essential, and I think being able to talk to fellow parents for me has been the most important thing, because I have felt so inadequate so often. Having other people to share the story and share the journey with is what really
knowing
matters
that people are going through the same thing as you, and that you don't have to be this saint. I'd lose my temper, I shout at him, and I feel guilty. I really shouldn't have done that, and you beat yourself up constantly that you shouldn't have done this, or you should have done something differently. But at the end of the day, we're all just getting through, we're learning as we go, and we're all just trying to do what we can, aren't we? It's it's not the easiest
I think it's important for parents to actually acknowledge the fact that actually it's okay to ask for help, not to feel that you have to
scared,
take on absolutely everything by yourself, because you don't. But I think for a lot of us, it's almost like, well, I should know about that. I should be doing this. I should be doing this.
Yeah.
But we've never, when we all start on our parenting journey, we've never done this before.
No, exactly.
So it literally is just a learning curve. And I always say, just, if you need help, just ask. Because if somebody doesn't know, there's a very good chance that actually they can direct you to somebody else or to somebody else. But it's just that initial first saying, help, what do I do?
But if you're automatically directed to, the school basically said, oh, there's these groups on Facebook, and it's like, well, what if you're not on Facebook, or you don't have that opportunity, or you don't have the internet, or, whatever it is, that it shouldn't be just on Facebook. It shouldn't be that that's where the support is, because some people can't access that. And I think that, for me, just being thrown a few leaflets and told to read those and, ask the school. I ask the school, they say, go on Facebook. You just get this kind of, it's always just passing it over to somebody else, and you're like, I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And you're reaching out for help, and there's nobody there to help you. And I think a lot of us have had to find it ourselves, haven't we? We've just gone, okay, I need to deal with this. I need to figure it out. And you just go off and you read, and you do your own research, and you want to learn more because you want to understand your child or children. I only have one at the moment. But yeah, it is. It's a difficult process. And then most people, my mum's partner is a drama teacher, and he's teaching Seb drama because he wants to be an actor. And he just says, oh, I don't think he's autistic. I'm like, you don't see him often enough and it's like the masking thing. It's almost like I've made it up. People don't see that side of him, so can't be true. I'm like, hang on a minute.
It's been much harder this last year as well, because obviously everything has gone online, whereas before you could go to your local parents forum and they would have obviously physical face-to-face meetings. You would have physical courses that you could go on where there would be somebody there and a group of obviously people. But even more so now, obviously everything is just online, isn't it? Regardless of what you need to be doing or where you need to be going for support. Even like CAMS appointments and things like that, it's all happening over video calls or things, isn't it?
And it's very difficult because you can't show them, like, everyday life. They may come and have a bit
Yes.
of an observation and say, oh, well, he seems fine. It's like, yeah, because he's masking it. You know, he's not going to show you. He only does it to me because I live with him and I'm his person. You know, I'm the one he can melt down to.
Or when I get, can you give me an example? How's he been? I was like, well, where do you want me? My other half does it every day.
Which bit?
It's like,
which hour do you want me to describe you?
How did the school drop-off go? Well, to be honest with you, it's going to take me about an hour to type out all the different things that have happened this morning. So let's just leave that conversation. And it's hard to remember all the different things. You're right. Whereas when they're there and experiencing it like school are every day, they get a much better idea, I think. I'm conscious that we have been going on longer than we wanted, and I know that we were
so easy to talk and talk about it.
It really is. And I honestly, some of the topics that we've covered today are making me think I'd love to do this again, and maybe we could break down into school support and just some other, even just the symptoms that I don't like symptoms because it makes it sound like an illness, but the behaviours that they show are, they're so varied. Even just talking about each of those as an example for people to help understand what it is that they experience, basically. So I will definitely be in touch with you guys again soon, because I'd love to delve into those topics again a bit deeper. But for now, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story to help raise a bit of awareness. But for me, it's more about saying to anybody out there who's feeling like they're on their own, feeling like they're the only one going through this, you're not alone, and there are a lot of people out there who can give you a bit of support, and as I've seen in the last year, remind you that actually you are doing a really, really good job, even if you don't feel like you are. So thank you so much for joining me. And I hope that once we've shared this, it's a bit of help to everyone else.